A little bit about my background. In 2016, I was classified as a cyber terrorist by the International Business Times in the UK, which made travel a little bit difficult. A lot has changed since 2016. It's now 2019, and now I can't leave the country. So there's been a little bit of a trade-off. Some information about where I came from on the darker side. I started with a group called Anonymous back during its infancy. Took part in some of the larger operations, some of the operations against places like Sony, some other denial of service attacks, and a lot of doxing against high-profile figures. I did a lot of government work. I was actually in the military for a period of time as a cryptologist, and was one of the Navy's first cyber warfare rates. Back then, they didn't have a school. You had to pass a board, basically an interview to tell them what you knew and how you did it. And they grouped together a handful of people that had cyber skills, and we helped design the first course for what's now the CNA and CND, the Computer Network Attack and Design. I've done pen tests for large banks. I've worked for U.S. banks. Bank of America was one of my employers. And I've done a lot of work for the DoD as a consultant. Like I said, now I'm a pen tester by trade, and I help people shore up their defenses and look for people like me. I wrote a distro called Viper Fast, voice over IP hacking distro. When I first got started really deep into hacking, one of my specialties was voice interception. And this distro focuses on voice interception on voice over IP networks. A lot of Cisco heavy exploits on that distro. Needless to say, Cisco doesn't like it very much. I do come with a warning label. I don't sugarcoat things, and I'm going to tell you how it is. And if that's offensive, I'm sorry ahead of time. Sorry, not sorry. So one thing I want you to remember during the talk and during the Q&A panel, I'm sure everybody's seen Jurassic Park from years ago. There was a part in the movie where Jeff Goldblum, his character, was speaking about how the dinosaurs were morphing from sex to sex to reproduce and find a way to recreate. And that's what I want you to think about when you think about cybersecurity. When we put up defenses and we come out with new technology, how long do you think that technology lasts before it's overcame and breached? How long do you think it takes before the attacker actually finds the way it ticks and takes it apart? And I like to challenge everybody that any technologies we combine and put into a network, you're actually making the attacker smarter, because that gives me one more piece of technology that I have to learn everything about. And once I defeat it, it becomes useless, and you've spent $20,000 on a box that sits in line and becomes compromised. So hackers are very adaptive, and I did a survey across all of my peers that I was in groups with. And I said, and this was before Hackers on Tour earlier this year, and I went to each one of them. I said, if there was one comment that you could make about hacking and about cybersecurity, what would it be? And I expected completely different answers from everybody, because we all have different personalities. But the scary thing was, it was all the same comment, that there's always a way. And that's, I think people in large corporations tend to lose sight of that, is that we put so much focus and so much time into building defenses and appliances, but we don't take enough time to actually connect with people. And that's where the shortcoming is. So what won't solve our cybersecurity issues right now? More devices, like I said earlier, better rules for IDSs, IPSs, and next gen. New algorithms, they just become old news after a while, and the attackers learn the algorithms and are able to do predictive analysis. Stricter laws. In the US, we have an issue with law enforcement as far as the penalties for cybercrime. They've gone as far as labeling anybody caught compromising the system as a terrorist. And under the Patriot Act, they were able to punish those hackers with like some severe sentences. I had a friend, Fidel Salinas, that was also part of Anonymous, that got arrested and spent 7 years in the penitentiary, and his cellmate was serving 3 years for first-degree murder. And my opinion is that it's not a fair punishment. And one thing I do appreciate about the UK, especially London, is that law enforcement takes another stance. I'm involved in a program called CyberPrevent, where they identify these kids coming up that have maybe violated the CMA at a very small level. But they see them as being a potential threat down the road. So what they do, instead of going and harassing these kids, throwing them in jail, harassing their parents, they give them insight into the world of cybersecurity. They bring corporations in, talk to them about pen testing, the type of jobs that they could have. And these are very, very intelligent kids. And it gives them a different path. And what I do with CyberPrevent is I go and talk to them about my experience and what it's like in cybersecurity now as a corporate employee, in hopes that they will grab onto that and continue down the right path. But it's definitely a different mindset as opposed to the US, where no questions asked, you violate the law, you're in prison. They don't even ask questions. Harsher punishment is not going to solve the problem, because once these kids or these attackers get into the system, the punishment system, they never get out. A lot of them can't get jobs. If you're charged with a felony, they can't go out and get a corporate job. So they're left with what they did before they went to prison, which is not productive. Like I said before, technology will always be defeated. I can't think of any technology so far that has stood the test of time that hasn't been defeated at some point, either proof of concept or live on the internet. What is a hacker? I usually use this slide to clear up the myth about hackers and the term hacker. Hacker is not a negative term. The media has used it to basically put a face to a crime, and they make us out to be evil people, which some of us can be at times. But the word hacker kind of annotates someone who's innovative, analytical, creative, someone who looks at technology and wants to figure out how it works, take it apart, analyze it, put it back together, sometimes manipulate it to do things it wasn't supposed to do. And that's how I got started. Dad worked at NSA when I was a little kid and used to bring home electronics. And his idea of parenting, which at the time was great, was grab electronics, throw it in my bedroom, and shut the door. And I'd be gone for hours. And so that started my tinkering and my curiosity, if you will. We think out of the box. We're very creative. And one thing to remember is that hacker is a positive term. I joke with people on the internet about guys in black hoodies. I wear black hoodies, but it's not because I'm a hacker, it's because I enjoy wearing something warm, especially in Scotland. But we're trying to get away from the graphics you see on the internet, especially on LinkedIn. When someone's talking about cybersecurity or hackers, there's always a guy with no face, with a hoodie, behind a matrix background, and it's absurd. What a black hat is. I'm sure most of you know the different hats that hackers wear. Black hat, obviously, is someone who has some sort of malicious intent. White hat is someone like myself who uses the skills that we have to help innovate and motivate technology. And we do it to help defend companies and help security as a whole. Psychology behind hackers. There's a lot of studies behind psychology and cybercrime. I spoke at Cambridge not too long ago, and we talked a lot about the psychology and what drives people to do what we do. A lot of us have a need for control, whether it be the fact that we didn't have control at some point in our life, or that we tasted that control and that power, and they sucked us in. We always accept a challenge, and basically that's what we do when we're hacking into corporate systems. It's a challenge, and it's sort of a cat and mouse game for us, and it's a rush. A lot of us are introverts, and there's also a good majority of us in the industry that are somewhere on the spectrum, and I'll get into that more later. We're very curious, and there was a study done. I was involved in a group study out in New Mexico, Sandia National Labs. It was called Project Tularosa, and they handpicked a group of us to go out there and be hooked up to all kinds of monitors and vital feedback, and laptops that monitored our eye movement, our keystroke, everything we did, they monitored. And they did it while we were compromising SCADA systems on a virtual network that they put together, because they wanted to understand how the hacker's body reacted to what they were doing. And what they found was that the same chemical in the body that's released during drug use is also emitted in the body during a compromise. So there's a level of addiction that's involved. And there's a lot of really cool studies going on right now behind the psychology of hacking. And that's kind of where my interest lies right now, is trying to understand everybody else like me and see how we kind of fit together and what the differences are. And I think that's a better way to connect and try to help secure organizations to be able to understand who's attacking you. Motivations. There's a number of motivations, but there's a common theme among some of the breaches. Financial, of course. I worked for Bank of America for a number of years, and of course, financial was the number one motivator for most of those guys. Reputation. Guys starting out in hacking, trying to make a name for themselves. One of them recently, Paige, she obviously was looking for some sort of feather in her hat and to up her reputation. She was very sloppy, and she got very vocal and posted things on GitHub, and it was over the top. It was very extreme. Some of us are involved in hacktivism, and that's where I got started, was in hacktivism. And that's basically because of the fact that I believe that some of the corporations that were doing big business weren't playing by the rules, and some of the government institutions were treating people unfairly, and we launched attacks against those entities. Was it right? No, it wasn't right. But the idea at the time we thought was right, but we went about it completely the wrong way. And there's some of us that are hired, whether it be by corporations, and there's a number of corporations that will hire hackers for corporate espionage, as well as organized crime groups that will hire hackers to be their one-offs to go and do their dirty work for them. What got me here? Natural curiosity. Someone tells me I'm not supposed to do something, that's the first thing I do. Natural ability. People ask me, did you go to school? Where did you learn how to do what you do? And I can't really explain that, other than the fact that my curiosity drove my education. I never went to school for IT or cybersecurity. I have certifications that I challenged. I didn't really care about taking courses. But it was a curiosity that drove me to where I'm at now. I was very defiant when I was younger, and that's what got me involved in hacktivism. And I was an outlier. So I had lots of friends in school growing up, but I didn't have that one group that I ran around with. I was always all over the place, trying to pick from different groups, trying to learn from them, trying to mold myself after little bits and pieces that I picked up everywhere else. The Department of Defense helped me get here. They took the skills that I had and made them a lot sharper and a lot keener and a lot more lethal. And of course, money. I would be lying if I told you that at some point there wasn't some kind of financial motivation. About me and my alter ego when I was in Anonymous. I was very ego-driven, and that's one thing that's pretty common in pen testers, ethical hackers, hackers in general. It's a very ego-driven community, and if you don't have thick skin, it's probably not the place for you. Persistence. I was very persistent. I was very patient. If I found the target I wanted, I would, as long as it took, whatever it took, is what I would do. I had no regard for people. When I compromised the system, if that system was connected to a device that may have a physical impact, that was not my concern. My concern was the device. It was a business. People make money off of it. Groups make money off of it, and that's how we fund some of the operations. And some of the warfare that went on is not only between the hackers and corporations and government, it's between groups of hackers. And that's why I call it cyber gang warfare. Within Anonymous, we had several groups that split off and would fight each other. We would deface websites or take over networks, and we would constantly have to regain our foothold because we had other groups that were fighting for the same ground. So it was constant. And then, of course, cyber war. I got involved with some APT groups under the auspice of the FBI after I walked away from Anonymous, and got involved in some pretty deep political-driven cyber incidents that I'll go into a little bit later. And I always went after the target with the most impact. And that's pretty much, if you're trying to make a statement in hacktivism, that's what you do. Cause the most pain, go after the biggest target. And I didn't have any remorse. And that goes back to, I didn't really care about the people or the organizations that I was going after. Some of the things that I did within Anonymous during the operations, and some of the things that I still do research on, remote access tools, very deep in exploitation, voice over IP interception. A lot of people ignore some of the services like VoIP because it's convenient and not a lot of security is put into it because it degrades quality of service. And there's a lot of room for other things in VoIP packets. There's a lot of space. We chunk databases and exfiltrate them through voice over IP. Some of the other things I did was government disruption. SCADA is one of the things that I focused on later in my hacking career, and I've done a lot of stuff with Idaho National Labs as far as SCADA systems and red team, blue team events out there. And physical attacks. I like to engineer different devices that I can leave around or that I can hand off, or I can drop into a building that will give me exactly what I need as if I was standing behind a keyboard within an organization. And some of those I've sold to places like CrowdStrike and some other organizations. What life was like in Anonymous. People always get the glamorous side of hacking in the media, on television. It's always a cool guy behind the 10 screens with 5 keyboards and 3 mice. But that's not really reality. Reality is there's a lot of looking over your shoulder, a lot of paranoia. The blackout circles within the internet and the cyber realm creates a lot of paranoia and a lot of trust issues. One thing I had a problem with was trust in people around me. I watched several of my counterparts in Anonymous go down by the FBI and serve multiple years in prison. And some of those guys like Sabu turned on Anonymous and became a CI for the FBI and helped put other people in the group behind bars. When I left Anonymous, I became a CI for the FBI, but I refused to do domestic intelligence. I focused specifically on foreign intelligence. And at the time, it was perfect timing for me because the US elections was going on. And I got embedded into a group called APT 28 And for those of you who don't follow nation-state actors, that would be Sophie or Fancy Bear out of Russia. And they're primarily funded and powered by the Russian military. And it helped disrupt the US elections. Like I said, I watched some of my associates being brought down and threats from other groups and agencies. It's not fun to go to work and have guys in suits show up and want to take you to lunch. It's a very ominous invitation, and you always question, am I going to leave this lunch a free man, or am I going to have nice new sterling silver bracelets on my wrist? But they're some of my best friends now. The London Met Police are very close to them, and they become some lifelong friends. What I do now, I have a corporate job. I work for a company called White Hat Sec. They do web app security. They've been around for a very long time. Jeremiah Grossman is a close friend of mine who's the founder of the company. I also lead teams. I've led teams over the years. My fiance and I started a company called CryptSec, and what we do is pen test and threat intelligence for pretty much anybody and everybody. I work to defend instead of taking things down, and I'm a public speaker and a mentor. One thing I found amazing doing the cyber event was the disconnect between the parents and the kids. A lot of the kids have neurodiverse situations, whether it be Asperger's or autism, and the parents and the police department have a really tough time reaching those kids. And really the parents just want to help. They want to be able to talk to the kids, and the kids understand, and the kids understand them, vice versa. So they brought me in. I have a little bit of experience on the neurodiversity side. I'm also on the spectrum, and it helps having somebody there that the kids can connect to. And it's been a career-changing event for me. I also write for different organizations and online publications, and I'm still a pen tester. And that's about it for me. Like I said, the psychology behind hacking, I'm sure we'll get into that more with law enforcement. I'm sure you guys do a lot of profiling, stuff like that. But I'll turn it over there.